Welcome in, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is the Next Generation Science Standards Earth and Space Science webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Evaluating Lessons Using the NSTA Sensemaking Tool. I'm Aida Awad. I can't even say my own name today. Be your host for this webinar. I'm joined by my colleagues Ed Roback from the American Geosciences Institute and Missy Holzer, representing the National Earth Science Teachers Association, and John McDarris from NAGT CERC behind the scenes helping us with all the technology today. Happy to have you all here. The webinar is being recorded. Today's webinar will be presented by Kate Soriano from the National Science Teachers Association, and she is their standards implementation specialist. So we're happy to have her here. There will be time at the end of the webinar presentation for discussion and Q&A, so please do stay for that. It's always a fantastic opportunity to share ideas from across the various stakeholder groups that we have present on the webinar. At that time, we'll also make the link to our post-webinar survey available to you. It's up right now, but you'll get it in the chat box later on. That's the only way you'll get your certificate of participation if that's something that's of interest for you. But really, we do appreciate all of the comments and feedback that you share with us through that. This will be our last webinar for 2022. We will begin again in the winter with the second half of our 8th season of webinars. So watch for an announcement coming out sometime in early to mid-December about what that webinar series will look like for January, February, March, April, and maybe May. We'll see how that looks. But please know that all of our webinars from all 8 years of our webinars are available to you on the American Geosciences Institute YouTube channel. There's a playlist there. Look for it under NGSS ESS webinar series. During the course of the webinar, it says, please feel free, but really I want to encourage you to engage in conversation through the chat box. It's not just a place to put questions, it really is a place to share ideas and thoughts as they pop up. Hey, this happened in my classroom. This would be a great idea for using this in this kind of a use case. We'd love to see that exchange of ideas there in the chat box. So certainly drop your questions there, but also let's have a nice conversation, kind of our back channel chat there. So today's webinar, evaluating lessons using the NSTA Sensemaking Tool, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Kate. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today. I started my professional career as a geologist, so I feel among friends. All right, so I'm going to call this web seminar Evaluating Lessons Using the NSTA Sensemaking Tool. I'll make sure that there is a way to share these slides with you, and I'm only pausing on that slide long enough for you to know that after the web seminar is over, you'll have my contact information, and you are more than welcome to send me an email if you have questions. And you can send that email a day after this web seminar or 6 months from now. So that's an open invitation. I'm also sharing with you a collection of resources. You don't need to be an NSTA member to access this collection. This collection is available to you during the web seminar. I'm going to send you into this collection a few times, and I'll drop the link each time you need it. But it's a forever collection. So as long as NSTA is in existence, you'll have access to these resources. I do want to share our norms. We are a small group, and we've come together to see what this Sensemaking tool is all about. And I really am going to encourage us all to be evidence-based thinkers and to support our ideas with evidence. And if someone shares an idea and you're wondering what that evidence is, I encourage you to ask what evidence that person is using to make that claim. Right? And I just want to also say that we always want to be in a situation in which that it is okay to change our minds. So don't feel constricted or constrained by putting initial thinking in the chat window and then 4 slides later wanting to say something completely different. That is welcome, encouraged, and the nature of learning. All right, so as we settle in to these quick 50 or so minutes we have together today for this web seminar, I'd like us to make that transition from school to this learning this afternoon. And I'm wondering how you're feeling. So on a scale of sheep, how are you feeling today as you join this web seminar? So would you share your number in the chat window, and if you feel like it, why you put that number? And I see us already all the way over the map or the sheet number. So we've got some 2s, some 4s, some 7s. Oh, a long day. So some people, so it's interesting interpreting that too. Maybe you're happy to be among friends, and other people are interpreting that look to be barely hanging on for the day. Oh, wow, Carissa, that is perseverance to be on your 4th web seminar for the day. Oh, and I hope, Christy, your observation went well and went the way that you hoped that it would. Wow, okay, so people are in the midst of a day of meetings. It's been a long day. You may have a long evening. So we really want to make sure to make the best use of this time. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share. And if anybody hasn't decided what sheep number you are, even though I'm going to advance the slide, I still welcome you to post your sheep number. So our goals for today, I can't promise you that you'll become an expert with using the Sensemaking tool, but I feel very confident that you'll know where to start, know what the tool is all about, and then really think about the ways you can make the Sensemaking tool work for you to be a critical consumer of lessons, for revising or creating lessons for your own use, or for use across your department or across your district. So the tool, we are working to move lessons toward these science instructional shifts that are called for in a framework for K-12 science education. The most contemporary research that we have on how students learn science specifically. And those shifts you can see on the screen. If you haven't read the framework, spoiler alert, I'm going to summarize the whole framework for you in 3 instructional shifts. So the first shift is that our work in the classroom is to provide opportunities for students to explain phenomena and design solutions to the problems. But I'm going to stick with phenomena because at every problem, there really is a phenomenon at its heart. The second shift is that students are doing the science. I need to change this slide because it's in those parentheses, 3-dimensional learnings. I mean, it's doing science using or through 3-dimensional learning. And finally, that third shift to coherent learning progression over time. And that has a lot of different meanings. Coherence across K-12, coherence across a school year, across a unit. Coherent from the student's perspective. They always know what they're doing, why they're doing. And part of that coherence in that learning progression, one of our norms is that students, when confronted with a growing amount of evidence, have permission and are encouraged to change their mind in light of evidence. So there has to be space for that. So that shift has a lot of different meanings at many different levels, whether it's a K-12 career or within a unit itself. So when I presented this slide in the past, people have said, that's great, but what are we shifting from? What counts as the start? And that is the information frame. Eric, this is, the framework was published in 2011. The purple book is you might be referring to an NSTA publication that took pieces and parts of the framework. It was sort of the Cliff's Notes version of a framework for K-12 science education. But the picture on the previous screen was what it is, the picture of the front of the book. It's in the collection of resources. It's a free download from National Academies of Science. Okay, so the continuum of science instruction. We're moving from the information frame. And we're moving toward the sense-making frame. And that's really described by those 3 instructional shifts on the previous slide, where our goal is to really help students understand that science is a process, that we build ideas in science and we do something with those ideas. We apply those ideas. And it's really a skill, understanding the process of science, that we use throughout our lives, inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and after our K-12 career. And I want to be really clear too, on the left-hand side, it says assessments are focused on the right answers. And I am not suggesting that students do not need to know accurate science ideas, but they are learning them in a way that they feel ownership of, that they understand them deeply. And when we ask them to use it, we ask them to use those science ideas for a very specific purpose and support why they're choosing to use their science ideas in this specific situation with evidence. So that's part of that shift. So we're really looking at science as a process, as being something that's active and ongoing and wonderful and exciting. In the collection, I've placed this video, and I'll drop that link again. You don't need to watch the video right now, but I'm going to be really aware of the time that we have together today. This is Helen Quinn. She was a editor, one of the main editors of a framework for K-12 science education. She does a really lovely, articulate, clear description of what that shift looks like from the information frame to the sense-making frame. And I really encourage you to watch it. It's only about 3 minutes long. All right, so sense-making tool, the star of today's show. So I want to give you an opportunity to get to know the sense-making tool and what is included on the tool. So I'm going to drop that link again to the collection and ask you to access the sense-making tool. And if you can either access it as a Google Doc or as a PDF file. And what I'd like for you to do in not enough time is to get to know the sense-making tool. And by that, I mean the layout, the categories, the information that's included, and the symbols that are used. And I'd like for you to be prepared to share observations. And I'm going to ask that you really check yourself, that you are sharing observations and you haven't made the leap all the way to inference. So be prepared to share some observations. And I'm going to time here for about 3 minutes for an initial overview of the sense-making tool. And I know you're surprised to hear this, but I am going to stop talking for 3 minutes so you can concentrate.
Hey, this is Ed Robick. When I click on that link, I get to a collection. And can you direct me from that collection to what you want me to be looking at right now?
Yes, if you go to number 3 or number 4, you can access the sense-making tool.
Thank you.
Now, I know some of you spent 3 minutes, and I apologize for the frustration, but appreciate your perseverance to get to the tool. But I'm going to move us to the next slide. And I'd like you to share some observations about the tool on a Jamboard. Now, our number, we're at 34. So I think if the hosts for now stay off the Jamboard, we can all work on the same Jamboard. So I'm going to drop one link. And move us to the Jamboard. And I'll give you the rest of the directions from there. So if you look at the Zoom screen, we should all be collecting here on frame 1 of the Jamboard. And you can see that the directions for what you're about to do are here on the slide. And if you haven't used a Jamboard before, this big arrow here near the middle, right underneath it, is the sticky note tool. And you can make your observation on the sticky note tool, hit save, and it appears on the Jamboard. Now, a design flaw of the Jamboard, they're all going to pile up in the exact same place. So once you post, you're going to need to click and drag it out of the way. So let's take a minute here to make some initial posts. And again, please check yourself and let's stick with observations and not yet make the leap to inferences. And thank you those of us who are getting started. And it's absolutely okay if you're still looking at the tool. I'd rather you take the time to do that, and then you can take a minute to see what others are posting. And you may notice that some of our participants are starting to make some check marks. That's the next part of this task. And it's something I do with students because I want to help ensure that they are really, let's write the right word, listening for what other people are saying, what their classmates are saying. And so I'm asking you to go back and put a check mark next to one observation that somebody noticed that you also noticed. Maybe it's not one of the observations you posted, and that's okay. And then to circle a post, something somebody noticed that you didn't notice. You didn't post it, and it wasn't on your original list. And I see some noticings that are bubbling up to the surface, that it is a continuum. We're moving less like that information frame and more toward that sense-making frame. That all three dimensions are represented. The division between what students are doing and what teachers are doing. So we're interested in both. The role of the teacher as a guide. Thank you so much. And I do invite you, if you can manage both tabs, to continue to post here, because this will become an artifact of the web seminar. And the link will be in the slide that you are provided, and you'll be able to get back to this Jamboard. All right, let's see if I can get us back to the slides. All right, hopefully everybody is now looking at the slides again. So, as many of you pointed out, we do have two rows. We're interested in what the students are doing, what opportunities the students have in the lesson, and the guidance that's provided to teachers. We also see the less like, more like. It is a continuum. There's always room to keep moving along toward that sense-making frame. There are 4 different categories that also came up. Some of you pointed out, and it got circled because maybe not everybody had time in the 3 minutes to notice that the cross-cutting concepts are included. And the reason they don't have their own category is that they can be used to support the building of science ideas. They can be an outcome of the learning with the science idea. And they can also be used to support students in engaging in the science and engineering practices. So they didn't really fit into their own category because, frankly, they're so important and can be used to support all of the different aspects. Where this comes from, why did we come up at NSTA with these 4 categories, and where does this tool really come from? Well, it is based on the NGSS Lesson Screener, which could also be called the Phenomenon-Driven Three-Dimensional Lesson Screener. And this is a research-based rubric. And if you look here on the NGSS Lesson Screener, this is a free resource. There are 6 criteria that we look for in a lesson that is moving toward that sense-making frame. But if you're starting from 0 and you want, or starting from the information frame and want to make that move to the sense-making frame, we needed to start somewhere, and 6 seemed to be overwhelming. So we picked 3 criteria. And what's really fabulous about the NGSS Lesson Screener is that each of the 6 criteria have a table that's a less like, more like table. Just like our rubric, that's where we got the idea. So over here, if you're reading through your lesson and it is very similar to the descriptions on the left, that signals to you that the lesson is over on the on the information frame side of things. And if you're looking at a lesson and you see these features, then you're on closer to that sense-making end of the continuum. So that's where we got our idea for that continuum, from this research-based document. And our tool, the Sensemaking tool, which maybe some of you noticed, the tool is actually called a Single-Point Rubric for Sensemaking Lessons. And it was shortened to Sensemaking Tool. And our tool focuses on criteria A, B, and E, because as an organization and research done on sensemaking can't occur without these critical aspects, that it's focused on phenomenon, students are engaged in the practices, they have an opportunity to build ideas, share ideas, provide feedback, change their mind. all toward building those science ideas and cross-cutting concepts that they need to explain the phenomenon in front of them. So that's why our focus is on 3 of the 6. Again, because we needed a place to start making that shift. So here's what that looks like when we take that language from those 3 criteria. Sorry, I'm having plural problems today. So I'll just give you a moment there to take a look at the screen. And this is really the purpose of using the sense-making tool. We want to move lessons to look like the description here on the screen. So we're going to take a look at the lesson. And because I wasn't sure of who we'd have in the room, I picked a first grade lesson because the process that we're going to go through is independent of the grade level and the subject area. And I wanted the science idea to be able, for us to be able to pick out that science idea without any trouble, independent of what grade level or subject that we teach here in this learning community. So here's where it all starts. When you use the tool, you need 2 things. You need the lesson, and you need to know what the lesson developer claimed are the targeted elements of each of the 3 dimensions. So here in this lesson, why aren't the sounds the same that we're going to take a little bite of with the sense-making tool? Here are the claims. The phenomenon that we're putting in front of students are that rubber bands of different thicknesses stretched to the same length make different sounds when plucked. That's the observable event that is occurring, and we're going to use our science ideas to explain or make predictions with those science ideas. And you'll notice here, this is important as well, that this is a little lesson, maybe lasting 2 40-minute periods, and only half of a science idea is targeted. That's legal, right? As long as in the first grade, my students have opportunities to build the whole idea. They don't have to do the whole thing in one lesson. And you can see to the left, the science and engineering practices that are being targeted with, we want students to use with intention, and the cross-cutting concepts that students will use to support the building of that science idea or applying that science idea to explaining the phenomena in a grade appropriate way. So just briefly, I want to share, well, who decides what gets taught in first grade and what the practices look like for a first grader as different from a 12th grader? We need to go to third point references. And you can see here on the screen that there are many third point references that you can turn to. And we are past a point in science education where if we're talking about what it means to analyze data in the first grade, we can't agree to disagree. Analyzing and interpreting data in first grade has to look the same in Wisconsin as it does in Florida, as it does in California. And so we turn to these research-based documents to help us really understand what it means to be engaged at different grade levels in the 3 dimensions. So what I'd like to do in the short amount of time that we have today is to use one part of this tool, the sense-making tool. And we're going to start with make sense of science ideas, because I also wanted to share with you that you do not need to use the sense-making tool in order. You don't have to start with phenomena and work criterion by criterion to the end. You can start anywhere. And so we'll start with make sense of science ideas. So what do we need to do first? Well, the lesson developer made a claim. And that claim is that vibrating matter can make sound. That's the target. That's what we want students to have at least begun to build a deep conceptual understanding of when they walk out the door at the end of this lesson, which may take 2 or 3 days, depending on how long the science period is. And what I'd like for you to do is read from left to right. Read across this K-12 learning progression of ideas that this idea is the foundation for. And what I'd like you to think about as you move from left to right, as you're reading from left to right, think about as you're reading a first grade lesson, you're a critical consumer, or you're developing or revising a lesson. How will you know when you are out of grade band, that you are asking students to do or think about things that they're not conceptually ready for, or that they physically can't do yet with their bodies? Because in part, that's how it was decided where these different ideas belong. So take a look, read from left to right, and what would be those red alert, red flag words that we might see in a first grade lesson that says, uh-oh, we are not targeting the science idea that's appropriate for them? Mimi, thank you for starting us off. Oh, Mimi, big heart to you. I love the qualification of the term, not the concept, because we're starting to build the concept. Thank you, Christina. Yes. Now, it's not illegal for first graders to use these words. They might have read books. They might have some of these words bouncing around in their head when they participate in a lesson that's built for first graders. But the focus, the goal is not to build those conceptual understandings at this grade level. But we're beginning. It's the start. And you can see how important it is for the first grade teacher to provide opportunities for our students to really own this idea. Thank you so much for those of you who are posting. Yeah, and thank you, Marie, patterns of motion. Thank you. You're going to see in this lesson where we're setting the foundation for all of these things that you're sharing in the chat window. So thank you so much for those shares. All right, so I just wanted to pause here. Although if you look here, this is a science idea, a disciplinary core idea about energy. And there isn't anything specific in the grade K2 band for energy. However, you may notice that the idea that they're building, that vibrating matter can make sound, does also support this learning progression as well. And the same type of thing, we're not ready yet to talk about ideas around energy. We want to make sure that we build a foundation that's developmentally appropriate, cognitively appropriate for kids to have ownership of, but it does also support this learning progression. All right, so let's dig in. I'm watching the time here. And what I'd like for you to do, now I didn't mean to cause confusion by listing multiple resources, but if you go to the collection of resources, I'm going to drop that link again. Once you get there, you have to find this specific resource. If you're an NSTA member, you can go to resource 8, that'll take you to the NSTA website. If you're not an NSTA member, click on resource 9, that's a PDF version of this lesson. Now, again, I chose a first grade lesson because it's short and we had a short amount of time, and we're looking for a foundational idea about sound. Resource 10 is the review document that has included all of the things you're looking for in a lesson. Okay, but I think what I'm going to do for you, for tab management purposes, let me do this. If you would just grab resource 8 or 9 and hold, I will put my screen up so that you don't have to get resource 10 for tab management purposes. And I'll display what it is you're looking for in the lesson. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look for evidence in the lesson that students are, the focus of this lesson is for students to build the idea that vibrating matter can make sound. Okay. And we are not going to read between the lines. We are looking for things that we can point to in the lesson. If you printed it and had a yellow highlighter, you could highlight it in the lesson. We need direct evidence that supports that that is the focus of what students are doing in this lesson. And what I'm going to ask you to do, in not enough time, is to read the lesson and record evidence of opportunities for students to make sense of that targeted science idea that vibrating matter can make sound. And because we have a short amount of time, I really focus on the student opportunities. But if you're a very quick reader and that jumps out at you and you want to move on to teacher guidance, go for it. And then I'd like you to think about, do you think that the gathered evidence is sufficient to say that that's what the focus of this lesson is, for students to build, or at least begin to build, that science idea? That's the focus of what the students are really thinking about and need to explain the phenomenon. So let me do this. I'm going to type in, oh, rest. I'm going to type in the targeted science idea. I can do it this way. Okay, I'm going to keep the Zoom screen here. You go to the lesson and see what you can find. Okay, so if you would go to the lesson, and I'm going to drop the link to the collection again, and I will share the resource. And I'd like for you to look for evidence that students are building this science idea, that that is the focus of this lesson. If you have any questions, please ask in the chat window. Otherwise, I'm going to stay quiet for another 2.5 minutes, and I'll check in on you. Okay, and I know this was a ridiculously short amount of time, but we're only taking a teeny tiny bite. Would you share the evidence that you have gathered that students are building the idea that vibrating matter can make sound? You can cut and paste directly from the lesson, you can paraphrase, but what evidence have you found that this is what students, this is the science idea that is the focus and that students are building this idea? Initial thinking. You are allowed to change your mind later. You can just share in the chat window. Something you read, something you saw, a phrase, a question, something that a description of what the students were doing, any evidence that we have at all that students are building this targeted idea, they're thinking about, they need to think about vibrating matter can make sound. So Rebecca is starting us off, and thank you, Rebecca, thinking about this idea that we're really more concerned as students about the sound that the different thicknesses of rubber bands are making. And I've got one share that came directly to me, so I don't want to use the name because maybe that was a safety, but this idea that they started with rubber bands, they started thinking about rubber bands, they started thinking about the patterns that they observed, and they had an opportunity to see if those patterns that they recognized held when they moved to a musical instrument. Mimi is noted here too. They might also say that the rubber bands have to be moving to make sound. So the teacher is guided to ask the students about that. Were they making a sound when they weren't moving? That's interesting. They think about how hard or how soft they pull and how that there's another pattern there about the volume. So this lesson really is a wonderful opportunity for students to genuinely uncover the superpowers of patterns. Look how much they can do by recognizing these patterns and seeing if these patterns apply in different situations with different instruments, with different types of instruments, maybe from stringed to other instruments that don't have strings but have to be struck or plucked. We didn't pluck them, they aren't moving. So Carissa, yes. So you're noticing something else here is that in this lesson, the teacher, although the students genuinely get to play, they genuinely get to notice patterns, they genuinely get to do something with those patterns, it is still a very teacher driven, because if it weren't for those questions, then the students might not be thinking those things. So the question is, how do we adjust the lesson so the heavy lift, the thinking is the students need to think those thoughts independent of the teacher asking the question. All right, so I need to watch the time here. So what I'm going to share on the screen, actually, I'm not even going to take a vote here. Just for time, I'm going to move you to the reviewers. This lesson was reviewed by the NSTA review team, and their full review is in the collection of resources. And you can see the summary statement from the review team, that they've called this partially met, and that they called out that students are asked to notice the pattern, that when the rubber band is not moving, there isn't sound. that they have to be moving to make a sound. But as you all called out, that the focus of the lesson was really on the pattern of the sound, the high sound versus low sound, that students genuinely want to know the answer to. They were asked to choose that friend at the beginning of the lesson that best matched their own thinking. So they're genuinely driven to do this work, but it misses the opportunity to think about, to really build that idea that vibrating matter can make sound. And so as a user of the lesson, you might decide, I'm not going to use this lesson because it doesn't do what I want to do. Or you might say, maybe this is the first in a lesson set where we get to notice some things where a question comes up. Hey, wait a minute, they do have to be moving to make a sound. Is that always the case? And can we navigate our students? Do the students want to pursue that? So I'm going to pause here. I hate to pause here, and I apologize for my poor timing, but I want to make you aware that the full review for this lesson is posted in the collection of resources number 11. After today's web seminar, I will post the slides in the collection as well. But what I'd like for us to do, we're a small, you know what, I'd like to move us back to the Jamboard for you to post questions, because we haven't had a lot of time today to build a learning community. And I want to make sure that everybody gets to ask the questions that they want to ask. So I'm going to move us back to the Jamboard. And if you come back to the Jamboard and move to frame 2, do you see how I did that up at the top? There are a little slider. If you have a question about the Sensemaking tool, and I know we only took a teeny tiny bite, would you post your question now on the Jamboard, and we'll take our remaining time to answer questions. But again, I want to share that the full review is there. I hope that you'll get a start to see what the job of this tool is, how the different criteria are really interrelated. And I know we didn't get a chance to notice this for ourselves, but I'd really love for you to read the NSTA review to notice how moving one criteria along that continuum really does drag the rest along, because of the interconnectedness when students are doing science in service to explaining a phenomenon. Yes, the Sensemaking tool is free and available to all, and it can be shared. And I will add to the collection a link to the web page on the NSTA website. So yes, free to all. Please use, please spread widely. So thank you for asking that question.
Kate, I think we have time for one question, and then we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. So I'm going to toss this question out and see what your thoughts are. So in the Sensemaking tool under phenomena and student questions, it says that students experience the phenomena, quote unquote. Can you say something about phenomena that cannot be experienced directly? Like, for example, a hurricane or a volcano for a child in Nebraska.
Yeah. So there are many ways to experience a phenomenon. They can experience it through video. They can experience it through photographs, like a sequence of photographs. They can experience it through data. If I want to experience a hurricane at a high school level, I could be.
Oh, unfortunately, your audio is going in and out, Kate.
Oh, sorry. Hold on 1 minute. Let me see if I can fix that. Missy, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there are many, many different ways in which to experience a phenomenon. Sometimes you might even do a little investigation, and the outcome of that investigation is the phenomenon itself. So there are lots of ways that a phenomenon can be experienced firsthand. And that's really what we mean. We want them to be as direct as possible. Is that helpful?
to the ask
Absolutely.
that question? Okay.
Absolutely. And we're going to need the last few minutes to wrap up the webinar, but there are a couple questions there. So maybe, Kate, if you want to just maybe type a quick little response on one of the sticky notes to respond to them, that would be great.
Absolutely. I will happily do that. So if folks want to continue to post, I will spend the next half hour responding to questions on the Jamboard.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was a wonderful presentation, and you really made us think here at the end of this day. And I know some people are feeling a little bit fatigued, but I think that this probably has reinvigorated all of us. So thank you very much for your presentation. Really very much appreciate it. As I said earlier, please do watch for announcements of our upcoming webinars. We will have a full winter and spring webinar series beginning probably in January. So watch for something to come from us soon in your email. If you've missed any of our webinars or want to go back and check them out, please check out the American Geosciences Institute YouTube channel. That's where you will find every single one of our previous webinars archived there. And the question was asked about how you get information about these webinars. Please do complete that post-webinar survey that will get your information to us for our listserv. But the post-webinar survey is also very, very important to us. We do take the information that you share with us there very seriously and appreciate your feedback and your suggestions there. So please do take that survey for us. John, if you could drop that link into the chat, that would be wonderful.
I just did.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And this webinar series and the NGSS working group is made possible by 3 organizations you see at the bottom of all of our slides. So the National Association of Geoscience Teachers is one of them. Please come and join your friends there. We do have a number of webinar series so that we have a webinar roughly every week. You can really just binge out on those webinars with NAGT as well as lots of other member benefits. I'm going to pass it along to Missy to speak about NSTA.
Hi, everybody. So National Earth Science Teachers Association is your K-12 Earth and Space Science Educator Association. Join us. We have a quarterly journal called the Earth Scientist, monthly e-news that comes out, and we do a blast just to make sure that you guys are supported in everything that you do on a timely basis. So join us. Check us out on our Facebook page first. Tiptoe there, visit us on the website, and in the family.
And Ed, AGI, please.
Yeah, and in the spirit of the season, I'll just thank everybody for being here and thank you for all you do for geoscience education, and invite you to take a look at the website that I just put 3 links in the chat to Earth Science Week, which is our main Earth science outreach effort that we do that we facilitate across the geoscience community and with many organizations. Also, our Education Geosource resource, which is a searchable database of various kinds of resources for you, and our general website as well. So there's a lot there for you to peruse, and I look forward to talking to any of you if you have any questions for AGI. Thanks very much again.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you to everyone from all 3 of us, myself, Aida Awa, representing NAGT, Missy Holzer from NSTA, and Ed from AGI, and as well from John McDerris from CERC and NAGT. I'm going to drop our email addresses into the chat box. If you want to reach out to any one of us, please do that. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll see you on our next webinar. Have a great rest of your day.